Hello and welcome to this video. I have been asked quite a few times now over the past few months, what the story is, why I'm doing this. So I thought I'd share in this video where I started, the journey I've been on through my life, and why it's important to me now to be losing weight and changing my lifestyle quite drastically compared to what got me to be morbidly obese in the first time. So I hope you enjoy, and I hope I don't get too embarrassed. My name is Mark and I'm here to help you live a better, healthier life. My goal is to help as many people as I can get into shape and improve their quality of life. Now, if this is your first time here and you want to learn more about practical and effective ways to improve your health, fitness and overall wellness, or if you're just interested in learning more about fitness and nutrition, start now by hitting the subscription button and the notification bell so you don't miss any videos going forward. And now, without further ado, let's jump right in. So let's start at the beginning, the early years. I was always a big kid, if not the biggest kid in every class. I was probably overweight even then, not that you ever thought of it as a kid, but I was certainly always bigger than most people in my class, if not all people in my class, probably most people in my year, if I'm being honest. But I was always very active, from summer sports activities, from rugby to sailing to all sorts of things. I was always giving activities a go. I was always doing, all of that. School was really into sports. I played rugby at the weekends for the club at home. I was always very active, but I was also, even at that age, pretty much addicted to food, preferably sugary food. So I was always big. I was always overweight. And it's one of those things that it never stopped me doing anything, from Duke of Edinburgh to sports, squash, badminton. The only thing that I didn't like doing was running. School sports days and things, that was always a chore, but I still did it. I just didn't enjoy it. Whereas I enjoyed the team sports, mostly rugby, if I'm brutally honest. And that's the kind of way my life went. I was very active, but I also ate a lot. Pretty much stuffed my face, if I'm brutally honest. I was always the big kid. So once you become the big kid, it's no surprise if you just get bigger. I left school, obviously 17, 18. We went on a rugby tour to South Africa. It was all very sporty, it was all very good. And then I continued that a little bit when I went to the US for a year, and I worked over there for a while. And I started off quite active, basically continuing my school. And then I fell foul of the American-sized portions and doggy bags, and slowly became less active over time. And that was really the kind of downward spiral. Don't get me wrong, I was never small. I can't blame the US on my laziness, because as soon as I didn't have to do things, as soon as I didn't have teachers and parents saying you must turn up to this sporting event, my kind of activity levels went downhill fairly rapidly. It was one of those things where it's only myself to blame. It was just made very easy by the low price of and big quantities of easy, quick, fast food that are available in the US, which these days they're available in the UK too, so that's not particularly anything. But going back a few years, because I am old, I am in my early 40s, it was a whole eye-opener, from Subway, which there was only about 2 in the UK at the time, to Domino's pizzas and all the rest of it. I just had far too much of far too much when I was there, and did less and less exercise as kind of time went on. So started putting on the pounds. I know that when I was at school, I was having to start shopping in big men's shops, because I was, even at 17, I was I'd outgrown probably about 15 most high street stores. So I was having to shop in big men's stores, and I was probably at 3, 4 XL when I left school, which isn't the best when you're 17 years old, but it just became part of the normal. And it was just one of those things that you didn't really think about it. It didn't particularly stop me at the time because I was doing lots of sport. I was quite active. Although I was big, I was mobile. It didn't bother me in the slightest. And that really was the kind of ramping up to where it went more wrong a little bit later when I came back from the US and went to university. So I'll talk about that in a second. Yeah, so it was big men shops. It was, 3XL, 4XL. It was, big clothes, lots of food at school, but lots of activity at school. The lots of food continued and probably got a little bit worse in the US. And the lack of activity, or the declining activity, just made that even worse. And then university happened, which, yes. At university, I'd had a year in the US before I came back to university. And that year in the US, I put on a couple of sizes of clothing. I became less energetic and less active because I was doing less towards the tail end of that year in the States. And I was becoming a bit lazy and liking my food a bit too much. Now, I know a lot of people go to university and they kind of reinvent themselves, start afresh. Unfortunately, I wasn't one of those. I continued to eat too much and do not enough. And although I joined the rugby club at university, I never did particularly well because I was having too much fun and eating too much and not training hard enough, and I kind of lost interest very quickly. And it was one of those things that's where I really saw my weight kind of skyrocket. So I probably came back from the States about 4XL, 5XL, and by the end of my time at university, I was up to 7 and 8XL. And not just that, because I was doing less sport as well, I was becoming increasingly less mobile and less energetic and all the rest of it. So it really was a bit of a decline, but because it felt gradual, it was over 3 or 4 years, I didn't particularly notice that I was sitting on my behind more, playing computer games more. I was going to classes, but I was going slowly, and I wasn't that bothered going to clubs and things afterwards. And so I was kind of self-isolating a little bit and just comfort eating, which of course, more comfort eating, more drinking equals less activity, you get the idea. It was just this, negative cycle of badness, which I never really thought about. And I met my now wife at university, although she was at a different university in the same city as me. It was one of those ones, that's a story for another time, but I basically asked her out for about 400 times. She kept saying no. In the end, she asked me out. I said yes, and 9 months later, we were married. So that was fantastic, and we're actually coming up this August to our 12th wedding anniversary, which is quite amazing. So it's one of those things that I didn't really think about it through university. My now wife knew me at university, knew me at my biggest, and it didn't particularly bother anybody. But it was after we started dating and then got married, it really became an issue in terms of wanting to do more with my now wife, in terms of holidays and activities, and just generally being around to spend longer with her, which led to the sort of life-changing moments, which was an operation I had to have, and I just wouldn't fit on a normal bed. So the surgeons were very nice about it, but they basically said, you've got a 6 to 8 month waiting list for this operation, elective operation, because we need to get a bariatric bed. And given that my wife is a nurse, I've heard all the stories about the nurses having to roll morbidly obese patients and doing their backs in, and it's a struggle and all the rest of it. And it was at that point I decided I didn't want to be one of those. I didn't want to have a special bed and everything else. So that was really the kind of kick in the teeth that I needed to actually start getting up off my behind and doing more than just playing computer games and going to work, eating, drinking, computer games, going to work, eating, drinking, computer games, going to work. And it really became at that point something where I knew I needed to change my lifestyle, because my lifestyle was literally go to work, come back from work, plug into the computer, have some food, plug into the computer, sleep for a few hours, go back to work. And it was fun, and I've met some great people online and that I'm still in touch with after 20 years, almost. And I had a great time, and it was awesome, and it's led me into being pretty much a nerd in terms of building my own water-cooled computers and building my desk and all the rest of it. I've really enjoyed the journey, but there's a healthier way to do it, and that just involved changing the things I was eating. I've said it quite a few times, the first 50 or 60 pounds, don't get me wrong, I started at 470 plus pounds. I say plus because 470 was the biggest my scales went up to at the time, and it maxed out the scales and wouldn't go any further. So from over 470 pounds, the first 50 or 60 pounds of weight loss was really easy for me, really easy. All I did was stop ordering 2 or 3 takeaways a week. Sounds easy, doesn't it? It saved me a fortune. I started cooking more. I could always cook, but started cooking more at home. It was healthier, less hidden sugars, etc. But that was easy. But after that was when the work had to start, and that work was changing my lifestyle, getting up off my behind and actually doing more exercise. We actually went and me and my wife actually went and got our first dog to encourage me to actually go and walk the dogs and all the rest of it, and take more of an daily active participation in life, really. And it was one of those things that I slowly saw my weight come down. So I'm now somewhere between a 2XL and a 3XL. I can actually not just get into, the clothes from school are actually now big on me. So I'm 42, 43, whatever it is now, 43 I think. And I'm now finding my school clothes are baggy. So I've come a long way, both on the way up to my biggest weight and now back down the scales in terms of that. But not just that, I'm actually getting back to activity levels that I had at school as well. So I am playing sport, I am going for walks, I am going to the gym, I am doing physical activity on a daily basis, which kind of disappeared from my life for a good 3 or 4 years, 5 or 6 years maybe. And it is one of those things that is slowly coming in, the food is getting better. And it is one of those things that, although I've always been big, I am now, like I said, smaller than I was when I left school, which I think is quite an achievement, really. I mean, it would have been better to have not got as big as I did in the first place. That would probably have been a better route to go. But I did. I put on the weight, I put on the size, I did all of the rest of it. So for me, I'm going to take the achievements where I can get them. I have recognised that actually there are lots of health implications to being that fat and overweight and all the rest of it. And I've realised that if I want to be around for quite a while, which I do, then I need to do something about it. And I started to do that a few years ago, and I've started to lose that weight. And I have lost the best part of 200 pounds, which, is an awesome number in terms of thinking about what you've lost. But I am still in a position where I still have around about 100 pounds still to go to become anywhere close to the ideal body weight. Now, I'm not sure I'm ever going to get to the 13 or 14 stone that I'm meant to weigh. What is that? I think it's like 90 pounds or something I'm meant to weigh. And I've got, 90 pounds to go, something along those lines. It is one of those things that, just getting healthier, that's what I'm looking at. Small goals that will take me through in terms of fitting into the next clothing size down from where I am. Those are things that are, fantastic motivators. All those goals, from not having to have a bariatric bed for the operation, was absolutely awesome. It was, taking more activity, starting scuba diving again, all of those things that disappeared from my life for a chunk of time, are fantastic now that they've started coming back into it. And it is one of those things that, although I made a mess of things from being a kid to being in my 30s, things have slowly been correcting themselves. And I say slowly on purpose. I'm not a big believer in all these fad diets and everything else. It's my lifestyle that's got me to where I am. And some bits of my lifestyle I'm really happy for. I met my wife, I've got some great friends, I enjoy my work. I don't want to change any of that. I don't want to knock any of that because I really enjoy that. But what I would enjoy more is if I weighed a lot less, could shop in a high street store, just buy things off the shelf. Those are things that would be really nice to do. And that's where we're aiming to, and that's where we're getting back to. But it really is one of those things where over the years, I have gone from, 3, maybe 4XL at school, all the way up to 7, 8XL, and sort of struggling with some of those, having to go for jogging pants with the elasticated waist. Always a bad look, particularly when you're that size. But if that's all you can fit into, then that is pretty much all you can fit into. And then coming back the way, and now, several years, quite a few years into this journey. It's about 7 years, I think it is, since I started, my weight loss journey properly. And there's been ups and downs. I've had good years and bad years, but it has been now a sort of 7-year lifestyle change. And I'm now fitting into, well, not even fitting into, the clothes from school, for my final year at school, are too baggy to actually wear. I've kept them around just as a goal, and I tried them on every now and again. They didn't fit. They fit, but they were quite tight, and now they're quite baggy. So these are all things that I've done over the years. Like I said, when I was at school, I was overweight, but I was active. I was doing things. I was moving. I was playing sports. I was going hiking. I was doing all of those things. So the weight never particularly bothered me. It was in university where I started doing less of those things and becoming less mobile, and less interested in sports and more interested in just computers and the bars, and pubs. And that's kind of where it went downhill rapidly from there. And now we're getting back to more sports, more activities, gym, walking with the dogs, all the rest of it. So really for me, the purpose of saying this and telling that story is that it's not too late to actually correct your lifestyle. I don't want to call them mistakes. I like I said, I met my wife. I'm very happy. We've got 2 dogs. We live in a nice house. I go to work and I enjoy it, and I enjoy the people I work with. So I don't want to see it as a mistake. But my lifestyle got to a point which was just downright unhealthy. Eating 2 or 3 takeaways a week, every week, and probably eating the leftovers for another 2 or 3 days that week. So basically most meals in a week would be takeaway based meals. That's just not healthy. It's not sustainable, not if you want to be around for a while and enjoy life. So it is one of those things that the moral for me is it's never too late. You can make these changes to your lifestyle, but you have to want to. You have to want to do it, and you have to be consistent with it. You have to actually decide, for whatever reason, whether it's for yourself, for a loved one, whatever the reason is, whatever is a reason that is sufficient for you to get off your arse and actually go ahead and lose some weight and change your lifestyle. It isn't too late, but you have to decide to do it, and then do it in a manageable, steady way that is consistent, and it's a lifestyle change, not just a crash diet, not just a fad, not just a week or a couple of days or a month, but actually from this point forward having a lifestyle change. And that for me has been the hardest thing, because it is a lifestyle change. I still like fast food and sugary food and all the rest of it, but it is being willed enough to actually stick with your changed lifestyle and making these changes to improve your health, your wellness, and the overall quality of your life. The things you can do, the ability to go around a museum and not have to sit every 5 minutes and be out of breath. Go and play with your niece and nephew or your kids. Go walking with your dogs whatever it is so easy to lose that mobility slowly over time, and you don't really think about it because you're not comparing yourself to 2 years ago, you're comparing yourself to the day before. And you know, if you had to sit down to put your socks on, you know, well, you've always done that. Well, maybe 3 or 4 years ago you didn't. It's one of those things that, for whatever reason, start. That's my best advice, is find that reason to start. Find that reason to start moving more and make those lifestyle changes. Anyway, this has been just a little get to know me and my journey, my weight over the years. I hope you haven't laughed too much at some of the pictures, but I thought you'd enjoy some of them, although some of them are embarrassing. And I will see you in the next video.